because like our seminar is also a bit fragmentary. We had an inauguration on January 17th, and the main body of the seminar is just about to begin. And the first speaker of the day, Dr. Debanuj, is down with COVID and is unable to raise his head from the bed. He's nauseous. So he has informed us the inability to deliver the first lecture today. But luckily for us, Dr. Varoshni Nadeshan has very graciously accepted understood our plight, and she has agreed to deliver the first lecture. I literally dragged her out of the bed today morning, but she's here, quite elegant and ready to speak with us. So I won't, prolong my words now. So Arjun, like carry on with the, invite and all the regular. Roshni Nadeshan is already with us.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for your wonderful words. And so we are here. I'm really glad to welcome you all on the behalf of Social Work Department of Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit to the second day of the international webinar Aloft on the theme Dislocation and Fragmented Identities, Social Work Responses. So like I said before, our first session will be carried out by Dr. Varoshni Nadeshan. So before starting our session, I would like to invite you all to our session and be with us throughout the session. Okay, as in an old saying, a wise should confront his inner demons. We professional social workers and trainees working towards the goal of social harmony. It is important that we should make peace within ourselves first. Our current session is to address the dislocations and fragmented identity. Now, I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Varoshni Nadeshan. Dr. Varoshni Nadeshan started her career as social worker in 1987 at the Department of Social Development and currently renowned in her field. She's a lecturer at undergraduate and postgraduate levels in the Department of Social Work at the University of Johannesburg since 2012. She is also the current president of Association of South African Social Work Education Institutions. She will be speaking on the topic, Overcoming Dislocated and Fragmented Identities of Social Trainees. Before handing over the mic, I would like to introduce our moderator of this event, Dr. Sunil Kumar. I hope he is with us. And Dr. Sunil Kumar is well-known scholar of Kerala in the field of social work. He is also the assistant professor of the Department of Social Work at the Payyanur Regional Center of Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit. Now, without further ado, we will turn that time over to Dr. Sunil Kumar, moderator of this event. Over to you, sir. I hope you can hear me. Reshma ma'am, is Sunil sir with us? Hello.
That was what I was also checking. I can't see Sunil's name here. So maybe like he thought it was at 10:30, and so shall I step in as the temporary moderator for the time being?
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am.
Once Sunil join with us, he will carry on with the moderation. But as we said, we are having speakers from all over the world, literally, because we are having speakers from Australia, Europe, Africa, and Americas as well. And it's good that we were able to begin this main body of the seminar with a topic on how as social work trainees we confront in our curriculum, in our social work training, in our education, when we enter into the profession with expectations of becoming trainees. How do we confront this world that we are living in it? Because like all the things that as social workers we work in projects which presupposes a pre-given identities. Like suppose we are working in poverty eradication projects, so we work with international standards and indicators regarding like who is poor, what is it to be poor, how underdevelopment is being measured. Or like we work with people in autism spectrum disorders, or we work with gender non-conformity, queer people. So all these are identities that are given by by different disciplines. It might be social work, it might be psychiatry, or it might be sociology, or it might be bureaucracy or social workers. So all this, and people people who are named by these identities have often rejected this naming process. They have rebelled against it. And like these identities also confirm a lot of recognition, but also it also confirm a lot of stigma, a lot of trauma in the life, a lot of human rights rejections, as well as human rights possibilities. So as social work students, trainees, people who are aspiring to be social workers, it's very crucial as as teachers and students, how we understand this world around us, how we form and strategize to intervene in such a context. So I'm very glad that this is the first session of the main body of the seminar, and welcome, ma'am, once again to the seminar. So the mic is over to you. Do you have any slide to show? Like it has been.
Yes, good morning, Reshma, and good morning, everyone. If you can please make me co-host, then I'd be able to also share my slides. Can I proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, good morning, namaste, salutations, sawubona, goeiemorgen, dumelang, lechai. I greet you all from sunny South Africa. It's almost 7 a.m. in South Africa, and it's a wonderful sunny morning here today. To the organizers of this esteemed conference at the Department of Social Work at the Sri Shankaraya University of Sanskrit, thank you for inviting me to share on the fragmented and dislocated identities of social work trainees. I am going to put my video off now because I will be sharing, and the presentation I have is actually something that I'm hoping you can see on your side. Reshma, if you can share with me that you are able to see my presentation. It's the PowerPoint presentation. Reshma? Maybe a thumbs up from someone to say that they can see. Arjun?
Yeah, it's visible, Varosh.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to you as well. So today's presentation contributes to the pedagogy of the professional development of social work students. Specifically, it attempts to unpack the issue of identity and professional identity, and how dislocated or fragmented identities impact on social work education. So in this presentation, I'm hoping to contribute to the articulation of the training of social work students and on their professional identity, and to offer suggestions on the role of higher education in facilitating professional identity, and ultimately teaching and learning specific to professions such as ours in social work. So this paper is based on a systematic review of literature on professional identity across professions, as well as a cross-country study on social work students' field instruction experiences in South Africa that I undertook and how this contributes to their professional identity. The participants in the research were social work students, social work supervisors, welfare placement organization representatives, and social work lecturers straddling across different South African universities, typifying examples of so-called previously advantaged universities and previously colonized or disadvantaged universities. And these factors contributed to the richness of the study. And it also contributed to the richness of the participants' experiences and roles. So this presentation shall cover the following aspects: the nature of professional identities, factors which influence students' construction of professional identity, and the major components of social work, of professional identities, and largely of social work students as well. So I hope to also briefly touch on research and theoretical implications and implications for institutions of higher learning, social work students, and the social work profession. Now, if you can grant me just a second to stop share, because I have a short video to also present, so I just need to tick some boxes there as well to allow that video to share. But I want to contextualize South Africa, and the screen that you have in front of you would be of the maps. You should be seeing a map of Africa and then next to it, South Africa. So as you know, the continent of Africa is made up of 54 countries. I live in sub-Saharan Africa, that's sub-Saharan below the Sahara Desert. So sub-Saharan Africa is here highlighted in this yellow, and particularly South Africa is at the southernmost tip of Africa. And South Africa has 17 universities that offer social work as a degree. And where I am situated, I am at the University of Johannesburg. And so there's 9 provinces. I'm situated in this province here where the arrow is pointing at, that's Gauteng. Gauteng might seem like the smallest province in South Africa, but it actually has 5 different university campuses, all different universities. The University of Johannesburg itself has 4 campuses in Gauteng, plus 4 other universities have their campuses here. It's one of the most populated provinces in the country. So just in terms of what, where we are situated in the global south. We also known as third world countries, that is outside of Europe and North America, and it's determined largely by the economy. That's what Global South looks at: the economy, development, income, political, cultural marginalizations as well. South Africa became a democracy in 1994 after a very difficult and traumatic era of apartheid. Pre-1994, we had the nationalist government rule, the tricameral system of government. We had all of our, we have racial segregations where each of the different races were serviced by different systems in government. The House of Assemblies was serviced the white population. I was employed by the House of Delegates, which serviced the Indian population. Then you have the House of Representatives, which serviced the colored or mixed, so-called mixed population. And then we have the largest population in our country is that of the Black, or as we know them, the African population, and they were serviced by provincial administrations. So what I want to show you next is a video that was put together by my students. This is just to give you an insight into Johannesburg.
Johannesburg, the metropolis with the tallest skyscrapers, was once just veld, which is bush, dotted with rocky outcrops, scrubby bush, and a network of streams.
Dr. Varoshni, I'm unable to see the visuals actually. I don't know if others are experiencing the same difficulty.
The same here, Reshma.
Oh, okay.
I think she wanted to stop the presentation for a minute,
Okay.
and she wanted to present
It
a
was here that
video.
two giants of the anti-apartheid struggle, Mandela and Walter Sisulu, learned the ropes of resistance. It was on a dusty soccer field in Kliptown in 1955 that the Freedom Charter was ratified, bringing together people from around the country to express their desires for an equal society. Some of the landmarks within Johannesburg are the apartheid
Dr.
museum.
Varoshni, you will have to present that video in because we are not able to see the visual.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to actually stop the video, but it actually won't stop.
Okay. Yes, so you will have to go to the tab maybe.
Diverse,
Stop it.
inclusive, transformational, and collegial institution with a student population over.
All right. Does that help?
Yes, that helps.
All right. Should I share it again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You will have to
Okay,
start.
continue with Varush.
All right. I'm so sorry about that. I'm just going to
Okay.
carry on. It's just got a minute left on the
Yeah.
video itself. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay.
let me just see if this can.
50,000, of which more than 3,000 are international students from 80 countries. This makes UJ one of the largest contact universities in South Africa from the 26 public universities that make up the higher education system. The Department of Social Work and Community Development at UJ has a vision to be the center of excellence in social work education, committed to social justice and human development in an African context.
And there can be no better way to celebrate our South Africanness than joining the global phenomenon that is spreading across the world, and that is the Jerusalem Dance Challenge. The Jerusalem song that I love so much.
Jerusalema ikhaya lami ilondoloze uhambe nami zungangishilana Jerusalema ikhaya lami ilondoloze.
Okay, so that just gives you a background into South Africa, really, and just explains to you just a little bit about Johannesburg and where I am situated. I'm not sure why that is still on, but I'm hoping it's not going to disrupt the rest of the screening. So what you should be seeing on your screen now is the degrees, and I'm hoping that is on the screen now. I must apologize for the transmission. Possibly it's too early in the morning for everything to be working out here. But apologies, I'm gonna have to just stop share and just stop the video itself. All right. All right, so I'm hoping I'm back to normal. So what do we have in South Africa? We have the, just similar to other countries as well, we have a Bachelor of Social Work degree, which is a 4-year undergraduate degree with compulsory modules. It's a very, very specialized degree, and I teach across the 4 years of the module. Then we have a Master's in Social Work, which is a 2-year degree at postgrad level. So the master's can only be attempted if one has a 4-year social work undergrad degree. You cannot get into the MSW without the BSW. And here we have specialities like child protection, community development, forensics, probation services, adoption, occupational social work, or as we call it, employment assistance programs, clinical social work in healthcare, mental health, etc. And obviously then we have the PhD in social work. So we are governed by a statutory body, which is a national body since 1978, which is the South African Council for Social Service Professions. It registers all social workers, all social auxiliary workers, and student social workers. Social auxiliary workers are the assistants to social workers. So we have something called a national qualifications framework, where each level of training is depicted on different levels, in terms of the South African qualifications framework. Social work is depicted, the BSW is depicted at level 8, the master's is depicted at level 9, and the PhD at level 10. But social auxiliary work is depicted at level 5. So you can see the competency levels itself between the two. So social auxiliary workers may not do social work services. Then we have student social workers, and that's the most important component of what we're talking about today in my presentation. So our student social workers enter obviously with a matric and a matric exemption, and they meet various requirements, and they have to be registered in their second year with the South African Council for Social Service Professions. In fact, they may not go into the field at all without that registration at second year student level. So the statutory body develops policies for education, training, and ethical codes. It registers bodies as well, it registers students as well, and it manages professional conduct. Now, Reshma, I see a hand raised on my screen. Are we taking questions, or is it related to my presentation?
We will take the questions once the presentation is over. I think that would be better for you, and also for the questioners to understand what you are saying in its complete form, and then start asking the question. Or do you want to take the question now? It's up to you.
I think let's do them at the end, in case I am covering aspects as well as we're going along. Will that be all right?
Yes, that's perfectly all right.
All right. So let's talk about the nature of professional identities, and I'm going to just loosely call it PI. Now, the classification and definition of the term professions has long been a debated topic. Social work is a profession by various virtues. We have regulatory bodies that are in place to actually make this a profession. We are registered with statutory bodies, and I believe India is in the process of identifying statutory bodies or developing a statutory body to regulate. We comply with the code of ethics, which is extremely important in all professions. We have, as I've indicated to you, the various degrees as well that give you entrance into the profession itself. So what we do know is that they are layered identities amongst our students. Now, Kaza and Cleary found that when professional identity is used for instance, as a noun, we hear of arguments that an individual will be considered a professional only once all training, all certificates, all credentials and qualifications of a specific occupation are completed and attained. And then there's the adherence to the professional ethics or the professional code of conduct that binds us in the profession, or it binds the occupation's members. But when used as an objective, the professional identity actually describes the roles and how we as social workers carry out our roles with knowledge and with skills. What we know is that professional identity is an important cognitive mechanism that affects our attitudes, it affects our behavior in work settings, and identity may be aligned to the concept of meaning making. Now, we use meaning making in our profession as well. This is the subjective psychological experiences, our work identities, our social group membership or job descriptions and role functions. So a professional identity includes a constellation of attributes, beliefs, values, motives, and experiences. So what are the factors that influence a student's professional identity? And what are these factors that influence the student's construction of professional identity? Where do our social work students fit in? Why does professional identity matter to the social work student? Now, we know that our students' conceptualization of professional identity commences with our studies, the modules that they are taught and how they execute these modules. In other words, the teaching and learning elements. Social work students are compelled to do fieldwork practice training or field instruction, and their professional identity is developed from an academic perspective, as well as their subjective experiences. And this is the subjective construction that is influenced by personal interactions at work and at interactions with their learning and working community. And in this way, our students learn about the role of others. Who are the other professionals that they would be interacting with? Who form part of the multidisciplinary functionaries, the role differentiations and the adaptations? Are our social work students fit confident to fit in within the larger multidisciplinary team? So social work students' professional identity can serve as an organizing framework for their self-concept. It's a focal point of their larger system. And in this way, they explain how they contribute to society. And these students practice within a professional code of ethics. And the code of ethics is the standards required of students, of us as social workers during our professional daily interactions with clients, peers, other students, employers, communities, organizations, etc. So professional identity provides behavioral guidance in the workplace. Now, as Leavitt suggests, our social work students need to understand their professional identity in relation to the moral decision-making and to behavior itself. Now, these are influences on professional identity, which I think all of you are familiar with. We talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We talk from an academic perspective when we're teaching, how we are teaching students to remember, understand, apply. And at university level, it's more than just apply, it's analyzing, evaluating, and creating as well. Now, I just want to reflect a little bit on the generalist intervention model proposed by Kirsta Ashman and Hull, which talks to the student's placement within the organization. And the student comes in with knowledge, values, and skills. And what happens is we have the principles and values of empowerment, human diversity, advocacy, social and economic justice. And we know that in the process of imbibing all of this and applying, students have to then be involved in professional roles, in critical thinking, in research, informed practice, and in the planned change process as well. And we are familiar with the target systems at micro, meso, and macro levels. So what happens is us as academics have to prepare students for the foundation of practice. We look at three key areas: the knowledge, skills, and values. And from a knowledge perspective, we look at the fields of practice, the various theories that they need to understand, the systems theory, the ecological perspective, the social welfare policy and framework, the social work practice, the research-informed practice, and values and principles. Then we look at their skills, and are we teaching them common generalist skills so that they could practice and function across the micro, meso, and macro levels? Or do we teach them the values of professional ethics, identification of personal values? And that's so important, because whilst they have their professional identities, one of the dislocated factors is that we need to understand that personal values are not immune to professional values, because our personal values become of concern when it actually shows and it influences the student's ability to function in the workplace. It also influences whether students are, or whether those values, that personal values that are projected, actually cast aspersions on the profession as a whole. Because when you see this, for instance, the news headline, it doesn't say, and if a social worker or a student social worker was guilty, for instance, of theft, it doesn't say man guilty of theft or woman guilty of theft. It says social worker guilty of theft. And that causes aspersions across the whole profession. So our values are also looking at human diversity, and we teach advocacy of human rights. Now, what are the major components of professional identity of students? Now, professional identity construction refers to a general process of identity formation. It involves specific identity work, and it can be seen as an almost interpretive activity. It's a process of acting, of doing, of interacting, where there's constant feedback from seniors, and that I am referring to supervision. Now, supervision is a transference of knowledge from a person who's experienced, as an experienced social worker, to the newcomer or the student. And we know that poor supervision practices undermine training and self-belief, and therefore undermine the professional identity of that student. The flow of learning must be continuous and not interrupted. Feelings of validation and affirmation of that student must not be underdetermined or even undermined. And that's what came out very, very clearly in my research, where students were actually relegated to positions of mere administrators rather than the professionals that they would should be recognized at, where they would then apply the values, skills, and knowledge that they've learned at universities. So our job is to actually develop that self-confidence. That self-belief must be fostered with proper role modeling and constructive mentorship. So if we had to look at some reflections from the research practice participants itself, they spoke a lot about coming into practice where they were feeling unprofessional and undermined. Their values and ethics were being eroded. Role modeling provides opportunities for students to witness and engage with the heart of professional identity in specific contexts. But here in the study, we found that students were shown role models, that social workers, some social workers, not all, but a small percentage of them that elected to become supervisors were actually presenting the profession in a very understated way, or even in a very unprofessional way, leaving the student to run with professional tasks, to run with foster cases, with serious child abuse and child protection cases, and the supervisor has gone off for the day or gone off to do personal things. So role modeling provides opportunities for students to witness and engage with the heart of professional identity in specific contexts, in action by taking on specific roles and by contributing to social work students' development of internalized professionality. We also find that from some of these reflections, they looked at, the practice, the social work and social workers as being an inspiration to practice professionally. We looked at personal transformation, where they were able to bring out their own values and merge this with professional values itself. And when working with others, students often had feelings of inadequacy, the imposter syndrome that we always experience. And they had this incapability of actually changing. So what are the research and theoretical implications? And I just want to touch very, very briefly on this, colleagues. So we know that literature informing research on professional identity encompasses social identity, social categorization theories, empirical studies, but we also know that there's a scarcity of research on professional identity, particularly of social work students' early professional development. For those of you that want to do your PhD, this is an ideal niche, an ideal gap that you can actually identify and work on. Can identity be taught by direct instruction? And that's, an implication for research as well. Does the lecturer develop pedagogical trigger points to assist students towards professional development? And will having a sound professional identity contribute to employability? What are the implications for institutions of higher learning, for social work students, and for the social work profession? Well, the education climate has changed over the last 18 months. The pandemic that we are facing has resulted in us as academics, as professors, as lecturers, as supervisors, all within the higher education institutions, developing a new normal way of doing. The historical issues that we were faced with are now being challenged as academics. A simplistic example is that of lecture attendance or compulsory block or concurrent field placements. So the mode of delivery was the same. Students are expected to be in class. Students were expected to be physically and face-to-face. Lecturers and supervisors were expected to provide face-to-face service delivery to, or supervision and training to the students. But the output from the student may have changed, although the outcome cannot change. So the way the students achieve the outcomes required of the BSW or the MSW may change. Students know that it's now not impossible to have lectures fully online. The university policy, for instance, of absenteeism for illnesses, pregnancy, confinement, grief, etc., seem immaterial in the larger scheme of things, doesn't it? The way that students achieve their outcomes may have changed, but the outcomes itself doesn't change. What we do know is that we have to train students that are fit for the future. One of the implications of the pandemic-related experience in academia is that we have possibly developed somewhat different academic and institutional behaviors. We seem now to, or maybe even in the past as well, to have developed a deep appreciation of the now. This does not obviously apply to those that did not have this appreciation previously. But with this pandemic and understanding the student experience, we seem to have a deep appreciation of the student experience and challenges, particularly related to this transition that we've all had to make over the last 18 months. This deep appreciation has developed to foster further lecturer and university compassion and support. We are deeply aware of and sensitized to risk factors, to safety issues of our students on their social work training. We have probably entered a space that fosters creativity in teaching, more, with more support being offered. And one of our key issues is that of the education climate. Is it static or has it changed? So is the profession in an identity crisis? Well, that's a big question. How do we function in multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary teams? Are we always relegated to the lower ranks of a multidisciplinary team where the medical profession tends to take the higher ground there? So colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, students, in summary, we know that professional identity of students, and in this narrative, social work students, involves continuous learning, meaning making, becoming rather than having a fixed point to aim for. Is it a matter of future proofing? I think so. The positive outcomes of having a professional identity, we know, and we know that Shaw and Bailey, for instance, always say this. It includes status, pride, and self-esteem. It creates a sense of belonging, of attachment. It creates mastery of varied aspects of the profession. It also looks at feelings of self-efficacy, motivation, and commitment. And these outcomes are all important for a successful graduate to transition to the workplace itself. And so we continue to navigate between professional ideals. We continue to mobilize different values through everyday practice. Students and colleagues, I provided some references, but what I do want to say finally is that I hope that this presentation has provided you with insight into the narrative map of professionalization in higher education, specifically on the training of social work students. Professional identity research has provided a personification of roles, the opportunity to spend time engaged in professional discourse. I thank you. Kia Labocha, Nkosi, Baya Danki, Dhanyavad. Back to you, Reshma.
Okay, thank you, Professor Roshni. Actually, we had a very insightful lecture, and Dr. Roshni was talking about how identity is also a meaning-making process, and something that struck me very crucial in her lecture is like how identity it's also sort of performance. It takes me to the Butler's theory of how gender actually is a performance or acting out or interacting. And for the performance, you actually have to have all these things. You need to know the background. You need to have the audience. You have to interact with them. So it's a continuous process. And Roshni, in addition, was also talking how professional identity is also it's also a process of becoming, not just that you have your MSW degree and then you have this identity fostered upon you. It's a process. And in South Africa, she was also pointing out how the identity of a social worker is actually layered. Like you start with as a student social worker, then you have like different layers of this professional identity which you develop as you go on. So you have auxiliary social work and have some questions, but I will actually leave it to others to begin the questions, and then like maybe when I have the time, I will also pitch in with my question. So, and like another very crucial aspect what today that was conveyed to me was how this how inspiration actually, like inspiration, modeling becomes a key kind of factor in people attaining the identity of a social worker. You get inspired by the other social workers, older social workers. It reminds us of the professional guilds of the older days, when actually the student go and like if you are a blacksmith, you have to go and live with the blacksmiths guild, and then you look at how other blacksmiths are performing, then you get inspired. You actually get trained in the skills. So now, though we are like situated in this modern very objective context of the universities, where we for our training, actually some of the values and factors, like all these things like role modeling, inspiration, all these things actually are there present for us to become social workers. So it was actually a very thought-provoking and energizing lecture to begin the day with. So now the floor is open for questions. So please, participants, you can ask questions, and if you don't want to ask, you can also write it down in the chat box and they can read the message.
There was a question earlier whilst I was doing the degrees in South Africa. So it was quite early in the segment. So perhaps that student wishes to raise that question again.
But I can't see anybody raise hands. Maybe like, if anybody has, anybody wanted to ask a question earlier while Dr. Varoshni was delivering her lecture, please, you can raise that question now.
I also see some familiar faces on the screen, or screenshots really, or Zoom screen. And I believe some of these students had actually attended a previous lecture that we had done. Yes, Professor Anthony, Jose, how are you doing?
Yeah, fine, Varosh. It was really nice to listen to you. Only thing is that we were in the organizational part. So, and really to know what is happening in the South African provinces, specifically with the status quo and identity of professional social workers, social work, and social work students. The experience of social work as a profession, social workers as professionals, students as professional social work, professional trainees seems to be very, very different in Indian context. So what I really feel is we really experience the identity crisis, and also we have the experiences of dislocation in Indian context, because we don't have a statutory council in India. We don't have a national framework. We don't have the national standards. We don't on the code of ethics. We don't really have defined the space for social workers. So we, instead of dislocation, what I would say, we are not located at all.
That's actually, yeah.
So this is experience in India.
You know, if I can reflect just for a second. So when my previous employer, before I actually joined the University of Johannesburg, which today actually is 10, I enter my 11th year at the UJ. But prior to this, so I had 20 years of practice, and then I went to a statutory body, the SACSSP, the South African Council for Social Service Professions, the regulatory body that I referred to earlier. And I was employed there as the Senior National Manager for Professional Ethics. So my job was actually to look at the regulation and the application of the regulation and the code of ethics amongst all 45,000 social workers, 3,000 social auxiliary workers, and about 6,000 student social workers, and run disciplinary hearings and basically ensure adherence to the rules and the professional ethics. And what you mentioning, Jose, is actually quite interesting in that, yes, the involvement of a professional body actually contributes largely to the larger scheme of things, to the application of ethics as well, and to ensure uniformity, because ethics is not just applicable to students. Please don't ever get us wrong there. It's applicable to practitioners, to us as academics, because we cannot teach without that registration. We cannot practice as social workers without that registration with the statutory body as well. So we are equally accountable, and that's what contributes to the larger scheme of professional identity within our social work profession as well.
So it was really great to start the second leg of our conference by challenging and reflecting on our own locations, our own experiences of dislocations, and our own identity concerns. That means the professional identity concern. The Indian scenario is basically a state where I think the listeners also are very clear about it, where we don't have a national council, and the governing system has finally come out with a word that it is not a profession in India. So the fundamental identity is a question. Whether it is a profession or not, that is not the real concern. the space of a social worker, the identity of a social worker is really, really challenged in Indian context now. We have equal competitors from political domain, from religious domain, from the local social service system. And how a social worker who has been trained at graduate level or postgraduate level, or as you said, in the level 10, India is transferring to that framework now. But how or where they are located, what is the identity of a social worker in Indian context? It's really something which we have to explore from an Indian perspective now also. And it's really good that Africa is having a much better position in the identity frameworks of social workers. Thank you for sharing these two domains, Verosh.
Thank you.
Actually, I have a question. Like in India, we have a lot of other, not professionally trained people, but a lot of other people who are involved in the social service sectors. For example, we have at the very lowest rung, we have the ASHA workers who, there's a lot of developmental activities at the panchayat level, take care of the health requirements and do the jobs that is attached to the health and welfare of the people at the panchayat level. We have CBOs, where we have peer community workers. They might be like for transgenders or people with AIDS, or it might be kind of like in Jalaniti or water conservation projects or women development. So we have all these people who who have some of the components that you already said, that they were working along with the professionally trained social workers. They have also observed, and they had also undergone some of the skill training, but not a fully professional social work. And they might be much more inspired than the professional social workers, in the sense that they're coming from the same community, they understand the problems better, they are much more motivated and inspired to find solutions for those problem. But in the end, like I have often witness situations where they might be professionally trained social workers are given posts where just because of your professional qualifications, where they are given a back seat, and which becomes a point of contention and conflict in a place like India, where jobs are a scarcity and people actually require jobs. So people, they start questioning like what right have a professional social worker to be called the social worker, given the identity of social worker above us. And sometimes you have this nagging feeling that they might be correct also. So I also saw this term auxiliary social work. I'm not very certain whether auxiliary social worker actually means like people like ASHA worker or peer educator, or in the community context, or it's something other. Anyway, like I want to have your reflections on these kind of situations, because they're also students in a sense, like they're also training. And we have this children of Kudumbashri members, where a special academy was formed for them, because they are from a very young age itself, because their mothers were doing social work at the neighborhood level, they were also exposed to all these things. And they might not have taken MSW degree, but they might have taken other PG degrees and so forth. So please.
Well, yes, Reshma, let's look at how social work began. And when we talk social work history, generally we would look at the Western influence of social work on social work development, etc. But we cannot ignore that. That's what actually contributed to professionalization. But when social work started, social work was not a profession, as it were. It was an act of doing. It was basically a describing word to describe the work that people, volunteers were doing, because they were working in communities. They were working with the most vulnerable, and they still are And at that stage, we had, what we would call them as lay workers, in a very simplistic term, that they were lay practitioners. But what we had recognized over the years is that there are issues. Now, whilst you're working with human beings, there are always risk factors. There are legal implications. If, for instance, something went wrong, who takes the rap? Does the individual take the rap, or is there a profession that takes the rap, or is there a statutory body that will take the rap because that body was there to regulate that particular group of people? Let's take a medical profession as well. We tend to always put them on this pedestal to say you are so well organized, you may have your own statutory body. And you offer a great service to the community, but so do social workers, so do the volunteers and the ushers that you were referring to, the CBOs that you referred to as well. Now, the CBOs, etc., are these organizations, the non-profit organizations, the community-based organizations, the faith-based organizations in our community, not just a state department working in the interest of our vulnerable groups. But our vulnerable groups are exactly that, vulnerable. And here we're talking about the poorest of the poor, the elderly, the women, children, our youth. And the services that need to be rendered to not just our vulnerable, but to everyone, should be of such a level that there's no comeback, that everyone receives the same high quality of service, that the risk factors are mitigated, that if there's, for instance, if a doctor gave the wrong injection, there's protection for society, because ultimately we are there in the interests of society. And by having a regulatory body and a regulatory framework, society is protected from unprofessional practitioners. And so we have an act, we have a policy that has developed into legislation. It's called the Social Service Professions Act 110 of 1978, as amended. And this is actually encompasses all of the requirements for people, for social work. It sets out the need for a professional board for social work that develops and that falls within the larger frame of the SAC, SSP, but they look at specific policy issues regarding registration, education, and training and professional conduct of social workers and students. So it looks at the profession as a whole. We look at the establishment of various committees that would have clout basically to implement, like the Committee for Preliminary Inquiry, the professional conduct committees, the committees of inquiry into alleged unprofessional conduct, that would look into unprofessional behavior. And one can only do that if the profession is regulated. Yes, one can take these complaints to the organization where the practitioner works, not necessarily the social work practitioner, but the organization where that practitioner is employed. But that CBO may not have the authority to discipline, or you find that the person may then say, okay, you don't want my services, let me go elsewhere and practice. So there you actually allowing this so-called alleged unprofessional activity to move from one organization to the other by virtue of the person job hopping. So it's extremely important to look at, the profession itself. It's sad that you're not yet recognized as a profession, but there's lots of literature recognizing social work internationally, both in the global north and very much in the global south, recognizing social work as a profession by virtue of you having a specialized degree, by virtue of you having a master's in social work, means that you are developing practitioners who are going to go out there and practice amongst these vulnerable communities. I've had opportunities of engaging with Jose. I've had opportunities of engaging with others. And I think I can see on the screen, Mary Joseph, that's on the screen as well. She's attended one of our previous lectures and things, if I'm subject to correction there, though, where we've spoken about, the role of social work in society and how social workers can make a difference. But if we're not protected, and if we don't offer a service that is subject to, checking all the time, then are we going to be effective in our service? Reshma, over to you. Or perhaps there's another question.
I think no, it's not a question. Sunil is there. I think Sunil can really have some interactions. Sunil.
Yes, sir. Morning.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Yes,
So
yes, sir.
you can put in some of your thoughts or start interacting.
Yes. Ma'am, I have one question. It's very interesting. I think means in the slide related with the reflections from research participants regarding the competence of PA. There is one point that is feeling professional and role models. Can you give more tips regarding how we could be feeling more professional, how our students feel so, or any other tips? How did you identify that as your research reflection? Because in South Africa, you have your own organizations and legal councils and everything, but we are still in the process of creating such an organization or such a council in our country. And even if the faculties and the practitioners are facing the problems of identities. So in such a context, how we can create a feeling of professionalism or feeling professional among our students?
Thank you. That's actually a very interesting question, and it actually brings to mind an interview that I had conducted in a previously disadvantaged community in South Africa, in the south of South Africa, actually. So what we had found was, you can always see that when anybody practices, you have the good and the bad practice. And when we send our students out into the field, we don't really know whether it's a good or a bad practice. Now, yes, social work is a protected term in South Africa. Nobody can just call themselves a social worker. You have to be registered in order to use that terminology. But in India, as I'm hearing from you, it doesn't matter really if you have that professional certification or that registration. So you have practitioners that practice various aspects of social work. And if you take social work, there's various values that we have to abide by. So there's three key aspects to any kind of practice. There's knowledge, and social work depends a lot. As you get experienced in social work, it depends a lot on practice wisdom. But that practice wisdom has a foundation. That practice wisdom has a foundation in some sort of theoretical knowledge. And that theoretical knowledge is what also leads to skills development. But yet you would have persons who would enter the field with no theoretical knowledge, but they've developed practice wisdom. They've developed the way of being, the way of doing things. And this is the way we've been doing things. Whether this is right or wrong is subjective itself, because who are we to critique? Because we haven't really worked in that environment. So maybe organization one may have certain practices that they have, which may not be ethical even. And then we as lecturers, as supervisors, would send our students to these organizations, because these organizations, we believe, are providing the experience, the field instruction training for those students. Now, we have supervisors that would go out. We have persons that would go out and check the validity of these organizations. We have people that would go out and check the validity of the training that our students are receiving. But the bigger picture is that student receiving an ethical practice? Is the role that they are imbibing, and ultimately it's on the job training. Our students are getting this marvelous training from university, but when they go out in the field, the training that they're receiving might conflict with what they've received at university. We teach them various theories, and you cannot just train people without having this theoretical background, this academic background. But when they go out in the field, it may not be applied. So there's that huge conflict. And one example comes to mind and I've reflected it earlier as well, where I had a supervisor that was, so I interviewed the supervisor and I interviewed the students separately. And the supervisor had then said to me, I don't know why I'm supervising. I don't even like students, but I have to do it because of my performance. Otherwise, they're going to fire me from this place. And so my question to her was, so you actually a social worker for, I asked her about her qualification. She was a social worker for 10 years prior. Her practice doesn't seem to actually be one of a professional practice. And by virtue of having this negative feeling towards students, made me realize what kind of supervisor she would be. Now, I was there as a researcher, so I couldn't really impose my professional identity onto her, because I had to clearly wear the researcher hat when I was conducting this research. But upon reflections afterwards, I could see that this kind of supervisor would produce a student, or would contribute to a student that would probably go off at a tangent, because this student now, it would cascade. When the student became a social worker, what kind of practice would they emanate, or would they fulfill? For instance, we know that if you reflect on your own training, your final year's field instruction is probably foremost in your mind. Field instruction is referred to as the signature pedagogy of social work. It's the heart of social work training. And when we put our students out there in the field, we are giving them that go ahead to say, go out there and learn, because what you are going to learn, you're going to implement. And they never forget what they are going to learn. I can still remember my second year of training in 1983, my third year of training in 1984. In second year, I was at a child welfare organization. In third year, I was at the House of Delegates, and in fourth year as well. I carried massive caseloads because we did a lot of statutory, as well as we did micro, meso, macro work. We did a lot of child protection work. But that's what made me who I am today. And that's what I can reflect on. But had I had a negative experience, had I been placed in a situation of having negative role models, then I would not be sitting where I am today. I would probably be in a situation of conflict, because my personal values may contradict my professional values. And I said earlier, our personal values actually transmit to our professional values, because it also casts aspersions on the profession as a whole. We've had in my post as professional conduct manager, we've had instances of people's professional values that had been questioned and raised with the council, with the statutory body. So whilst the statutory body does not have the clout to investigate personal values, but if that personal values casts aspersions on that person's ability to conduct their daily activities in a way that does not take the status and dignity into disrepute of that profession, then we have challenges, and then we need to investigate. We need to look at what is the influence of poor role modeling on students' behavior. I'm hoping that I've answered your question, Sunil Kumar. If I haven't, please ask me again to explain certain parts.
Thank you, ma'am. Fully satisfied. And right now, I think this is the right way of practicing social work, and this is the right instructions that we want to give our students when we are sending them to the field. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very happy Dr. Sunil is here, so you kindly take over.
Extremely sorry. Maybe you are the right person for giving the concluding remarks, and thank you for that.
Okay, Sunil. So again, the floor is open. So if there is any more questions, please, now is the right time to ask it. You can either raise your hands or you can come on and speak, since there are.
Hello, Verosh. Can you listen? Yeah, I think I was muted. Yeah. In fact, my concern is also with this identity of social work educators in South Africa. Do we have any usual knowledge upgradation processes or any statutory processes like that to keep the identity and the space of social work educators? We always talk about practitioners, we always talk about students, but we seldom talk about ourselves. What do we have in South Africa to establish the identity of social work educators?
Okay, thanks. Thank you for that question. So if we look at the basis for teaching, obviously we have experience as professional social workers, and that's the basis. But ultimately, all of us are subject to the same legislation. And the legislation that I've alluded to is the Social Service Professions Act 110 of 1978. In terms of Section 15(1)(d) of that section, of that act, anyone that teaches social work has to be registered with the statutory body. Anyone that practices has to be registered with that statutory body. Now, so this governs the way we teach. This governs also our own personal behavior as lecturers, as academics, as teachers in social work. But we also have a professional association in South Africa that Reshma and Arjun had alluded to earlier in the introduction of me. So just a point of correction, I'm actually the immediate past president of the Association of Social Work Academics in South Africa. It's called the Association of South African Social Work Education Institutions. And this is a professional association that is not so much a regulatory body, but it actually registers all the universities that teach social work in South Africa. It provides a platform for sharing, but it also provides this platform, should I say, not overtly, but just it's there. It's implicit that if you belong to this university, and this university is registered with the SASWE, the Association of South African Social Work Education Institutions, then by virtue of your organization's registration, yes, you would get you would have to comply with various ethical codes. But this association also provides registration, for instance, with the IASSW. It provides registration with an organization called ASWA, the Association of Social Work Institutions in Africa. And it also provides with ASWA, the International Association for the Schools of Social Work. And that three-legged process actually then forces social work lecturers and academics by virtue of that registration to also abide by various professional roles, and by, and contributing to the professional identity as educators. So as educators in South Africa, we belong to ASASWE, we belong to the the Association of the Schools of Social Work in Africa, that's called, acronym is ASWA, and ultimately we belong to the IASSW as well. And these organizations provide various opportunities, especially for all of us in developing countries. Yes, we get reduced rates to conferences. We get knowledge of all of the conferences and the opportunities, the funding, and the various policies that are happening worldwide. As an educator, I was provided the opportunity of being a consultant on the global standards for social work education, which I would not ordinarily have been given that opportunity had I not been an educator and a registered educator as well. So, Josie, I'm hoping that that has adequately responded to you.
This is also an area in India. We don't have such an association working. We don't have a statutory council working. So we are not in that line to link with. But in Kerala, we have an association of schools of social work currently working with. But the process is also very, very low in Kerala context too, because these type of associations doesn't have mandatory links with the council system. Until and unless we get that council being enacted, identity concerns and the space of social worker will be always in a flux. That is what is being experienced in India.
Well, there's always a place to start, and we had started some time ago. We happen to be maybe on a different level where we've started and we're in that process. And all countries would probably be at different levels as well. And maybe in 10 years' time, when we have the same conversation and we have a repeat of this conference, God willing, we're all going to be there, and we're going to reflect what happened on the 1st of February 2022, that look at the way we've come, because we also started in the same sphere. It started with conferences like this, and I'm aware of your the Kerala Association of Educators, Jose. You're doing wonderful work. Things like this as well, you know, that you're putting together, and we've been speaking about this as well. Now, the IASSW invites small groups and individuals to also become members of IA. So that could be a start as well, maybe at different levels.
We are also really thinking in terms of getting an affiliation to IASSW. I think you will be able to listen a bit for us in future.
Sorry?
You will be able to listen a bit for us.
Yes, actually the executive secretary of the IA is based in Mumbai, Reshma, and you know, yes, and if you contact her as well, she's very, very clued up on the IA work, and would be able to also link you know, directly with you and give you all the information.
What's her name? Who is settled in Mumbai?
Reshma, I can send you the details.
Yeah, that will be fine.
I'll send you Reshma's details, and you can contact her directly.
Her name also is Reshma. Okay, that's great.
Yes, there we have another Reshma. No, it's not you, Reshma, but it's
yeah, we will definitely get in touch with her.
Yes, I will send you her details. I'm just looking for her surname. It probably will. I think it's definitely a different Reshma.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
All right, but yeah, I'll send you that.
Okay, thanks for that. So that's a lot of things to look forward to, because like in between you also said, like, you know, about the global south, and I think definitely there is a need for like professionals working in the global south to actually come together and, you know, develop models and theories and practices that are not just globally transmitted, because our conditions like require very specific kind of engagements with it. So that is another sort of beginning point, to have dialogue across, you know, professionals across global south and see what we can do. So that's another possibility. And I think this
I really, in continuation with what Rashma said, we really look forward a time when we can reverse the seesaw in which global South gets that contributions to global North.
Precisely. That
Yes.
actually is a momentous historical development, and I'm hoping we are still going to be present when that happens.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, like, like something about what Jose was asking, and which like, about the identity of the teachers or the educators, like, and how we were also talking about theory, how theory becomes one of the core points of our professional identity. And we know, like, in many times when we ourselves teach students outdated theories which emerge, like, long back the history of social work, without actually critically engaging with that particular theoretical perspective. Of course, you have to teach a lot of a range of theories, but, and we know, like, like, not just the practitioners, people who are like, who are having that particular problem or particular identity, they engage with the theory much more critically than us, and which results in actually changing the whole theoretical perspective. Just look in the history of, psychiatric disorder classification, and see how many times it was changed. And most of those changes did not come from the educators. It came from the, like, people who are dubbed as abnormal under different classificatory systems. So the knowledge is produced outside the universities with the people whom we are engaging with. So it's a sort of, like, your professional identity also requires engaging with our clients, not just as a professional helping people, but as, your kind of co-thinkers in the process, your participants in this thinking through this process. So, like, I think since there are no more questions, and since we are also found out points where we can continue these engagements further
Yes.
into
And deliberations too.
deliberations, yeah. At least Professor Dr. Varoshni has said 10 years now, so we have a 10-year plan now in
Yes.
2032 when we are meeting again.
Yes.
So it was a, like, it was a very nice morning, though today morning dawned upon us with a lot of threats, but thanks to you, we were able to overcome it, and we had
Yes.
interesting, engaging, reflective sort of session. Thanks once again
Yes.
for being with us. So I now invite the person, the student who's delivering the thanks, vote of thanks. Joseph, do you have anything more to add? Like,
Yeah. Anyway, this association with Varouche, Johannesburg University, as well as the entire South African social work fraternity, is a great step. I think we will further consolidate it and strengthen it to a level where we can have a partnership or a collaborative development system, so that we can have much more international deliberations collectively, as well as exchanges possibly, and slowly we will be able to work together a bit more in the sector. So this is a good beginning, so that we can slowly get more and more educational involvement and collaborative engagements. So thanks a lot, Varosh.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you for
yeah.
having me.
We very positively look forward for a time when we can really have you here in Kerala. So we have been continuously getting postponed with the plan. We will find
Yes.
some time.
Oh, well,
to get together.
it's going to happen this year, COVID willing. It's going to
Yeah.
happen towards the end of this year, yes. And we would
Yes.
negotiate and the
We will
dates,
definitely
etc.
come out with a plan.
I would be honored to
Yeah.
come into your university. I would really
Yes,
be honored.
definitely we look forward. Okay. Sorry. Resma, I think we will move to
the vote of thanks.
Yeah. Can I interfere? I would like to add one thing. Hello? Hello? Am I
Hello?
able to hear?
Yes.
Yeah, Arjun.
Oh, okay. There is a feedback form of the webinar. You can
Yeah.
find it in the chat box. Don't forget to fill it out. Then only
Yeah,
the service
yeah.
can be given. And another thing is, there won't be a webinar at 11:30 as scheduled before. Our next session will be at 2:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time.
Yeah. Okay.
This will be the presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
And sir, Alina is prepared for vote of thanks.
Yeah, okay. So, Alina, proceed with.
A very good morning to all. Honorable Chief Guest, Dr. Vareshnu Nadeshan, Moderator of the day, Dr. Reshma Bharadwaj, the respected faculties and other well-wishers. It gives me immense pleasure to express our sincere thanks to all the dignitaries who have gathered here. I would like to thank our Chief Guest, Professor Vareshnu Nadeshan, University Assistant Professor, University of Johannesburg, South Africa, who honored this function with her inspirational knowledge and reflective thoughts. We all enjoyed your beautiful presentation. Thank you, ma'am, to be with us and also for enriching us. A big thanks to Dr. Reshma Bharadwaj, Assistant Professor of our Department of Social Work, SSU Scaladi, and Dr. Sunil Kumar, Assistant Professor, Regional Center Pioneer, for moderating this section. I am very much glad to thankful to the head of our department, Dr. Jose Anthony, and all other faculties for their endless support and dedication for organizing Aloft International Webinar. I also extend my sincere thanks to all the participants from various universities and colleges for a valuable presence. Our students made a great effort to coordinate this event really successful. Thank you, dear friends. Once again, I thank all of you for a cordial cooperation. Thank you.
Okay. So really, Varush, it was what to say, preponing the session was really a tough experience for you, we know, because it's really, it's only early in the morning in South Africa. But we are very sorry about what happened because our first speaker was not able to join. He is affected with COVID. So he was not able to join with us. And we really acknowledge the way you have expressed your gesture of concern and the way you have taken up that situation. Thank you specifically for that.
You're more than welcome. And thank you again for having me. It was a real pleasure to share with you experiences from South Africa, experiences from the Global South, experiences from Africa. And I would look forward to further engagements. I think it's something that we definitely open to, particularly at the University of Johannesburg.
Yeah, thank you. We'll definitely keep in touch with. We'll continue.
Thank you. And
thank
if you can give me the link, you had live streamed this. If you could maybe also put the link in the chat. And would you also require me to register, Reshma? You've got a feedback form?
No, you need not register. That's
I think this is the same ID. You can join the other sessions also. And also, I think they will share the YouTube link.
YouTube link will be shared.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
thank you so
nice
much.
Of being with. So thank you, Reshma. Thank you all who have made the session wonderfully engaged with.
And I believe you also have someone else from the University of Johannesburg joining you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that is Rajendra Baikadi.
Baikadi, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he's a postdoc research fellow, very esteemed postdoc research fellow.
And he is he has got a very very strong research base, as well as he is very visionary and reflective in the process.
That's true.
YouTube link is shared here, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Rajendra, I'm actually Rajendra's supervisor in South Africa.
That's great. Yeah. Yes. That's wonderful. And to have you both is